Ceann Comhairle, in the general election earlier this year, the people spoke and in doing so delivered a clear message. They wanted a fairer Ireland with decent services at its core. They were determined to set Ireland in a new direction. They wanted to see a less divided Ireland, a more inclusive and a more caring country. It is evident today the voice of the ordinary people of Ireland has brought about a marked change in budgetary policy. As a party, we campaigned for and pledged to work towards a fairer Ireland. For us, that's not just a catchphrase. In practical terms, it means an Ireland that invests in people and services as a priority. The principle of having access to good quality public services when people most need them lies at its heart. We promise to work for an Ireland where the benefits of economic recovery can be enjoyed by all, not just a select few. This budget comes at a time of great uncertainty for our country following the Brexit vote in June, and we face into crucial negotiations on what exactly this means for Ireland. This is the inescapable backdrop to Budget 2017, and it is one we must face up to. Ceann Comhairle, let's deal up front with the context for this budget in our Parliament. The confidence and supply arrangement we entered into with Fine Gael requires us as a party to facilitate budgets consistent with the agreed policy priorities in that agreement. We should not forget it is the first time in the history of our state that such an arrangement was entered into. It was entered into because it was necessary to ensure, following an inconclusive general election, that a government was formed. That agreement gives priority to investment in public services over tax cuts and required at least a 2-to-1 split in budgets to recognise the new priorities. This was essential, in our view, to give effect to the message from voters in the general election in February. And that has been achieved in this budget. In fact, it has been more than achieved. In today's budget, the split between expenditure on services and investing in our people on the one hand and taxation measures on the other is actually 3-to-1. By any measure, this is a significant achievement and is a major departure from the policies of the last Fine Gael Labour government. We didn't get everything we wanted in this budget, but we have secured some vital progress on a number of priorities set out in that agreement, including in health, social protection, education, housing and fair reductions in the burden of tax. But Ceann Comhairle, I want to be clear on one thing. While we didn't write this budget, from the outside we influenced it as best we could in the direction of a fairer and a more decent Ireland, and we make no apologies for that. Today's budget is a better budget because of the influence we have brought to bear. On the face of it, it is certainly a fairer budget than the last 5 introduced by the previous Fine Gael and Labour government. Like everyone else, we will await all the details as they are released, department by department, over the coming days. Many of the measures announced by both ministers today can be traced back directly to the confidence and supply arrangement entered into prior to the formation of this government and prior to the drawing up of the programme for government. The fact that Fianna Fáil has some role in the passage of the budget will of course be used as a reason to attack us. These attacks will be as predictable as night follows day. What is true is that we have not shirked our responsibility to the people who elected us, unlike others. And it is no harm to cast our minds back to last February, when the people did vote in a general election. No sooner had the votes been counted when parties like Sinn Féin, the AAA, People Before Profit, the Labour Party, Social Democrats and others all said forming a government was nothing to do with them. And they proceeded to take a 10-week holiday before a government was actually formed. When it became clear, Ceann Comhairle, that we were not going to get to support the former government, we recognised our responsibility to ensure that the country had a government, and we played our part in achieving that. Those who will stand up here and criticise every single item in this budget need to be reminded that they had the chance to have their say, but didn't take it. They couldn't bring themselves to do something positive with the votes they received. Instead, they chose the old reliable and most comfortable position of all of saying no, as they always do, to pretty much everything. For too many in this House, accepting responsibility is always the job of somebody else. The bigger picture is the centre ground politics is under attack, and I agree with Minister Donoghue on that. There are various definitions of what the centre ground is. It's under attack not just here in Ireland, but indeed throughout Europe. And when you look at the alternative, you realise just how vital it is that the centre holds. Most people in Ireland are not on the hard left or the extreme right. They are moderate, fair-minded people who want to see their politicians act sensibly and for the common good. In fact, they want those of us with the privilege of being elected in this House to get on with it. They want to see us work together where we can and iron out our differences. They want less of the old adversarial over and back tit-for-tat politics. I have learned a few things in politics, Ceann Comhairle. Those who shout the loudest do not always have the most conviction about their beliefs. Those whose policies more easily lend themselves to headlines or soundbites are not always right. Far from it, in fact. And when I look at the remainder of the opposition here in the House today, I become even more resolute in my view that the centre has to hold. Sinn Féin advocates €1.7 billion of new taxes. At a time of an unprecedented rental crisis, with landlords leaving the market, they want to increase tax on rental properties. At a time when we can't recruit consultants for our hospitals, they want to charge them and others 7% more in income tax. At a time of enormous uncertainty, they want to increase tax on employers. But not to be outdone on the far left, the AAA and PBB have gone for no less than €25 billion in new taxes. Yes, 25 billion. I won't even go into it. That is the alternative to the centre ground. Ceann Comhairle, Fianna Fáil's central point is that the annual budget has to be more than the total of the sums contained within it. It is an opportunity to at least leave a fingerprint of a vision for the country. I will speak in a while about some of the long-term challenges facing our country, but in the here and now, our absolute priority has to be to help people who are in a desperate way because of a terrible housing crisis, those who are stuck on endless hospital waiting lists, the elderly, people with disabilities and those who care for them, families of children with special needs and older people at home without adequate supports. And that's what reshaping budgetary policy in the direction of 3 to 1 actually means, is that you can do something tangible about all of those issues. And that has been our objective as part of this budgetary process. It's not ideological, it's not about getting 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 for the sake of it, it's so that you can actually do something practical and tangible for the people we represent. As a party, we put in the hard yards. We negotiated after the election to ensure a government was formed, and we negotiated again in recent weeks to get as many measures as possible into the budget that we wanted to see. No, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we have definitely had an impact, and I think that will be clear for all to see. Ceann Comhairle, the budgetary process in Ireland is undoubtedly a relic of the past. We welcome the reforms which have started, but much more needs to be done. The Committee on Budget Oversight has done a good job in a short space of time. We now need the Independent Budget Office to be established without delay. Budgeting has to become a whole-of-year exercise, and there should be no late surprises. Take this budget, for example. Every Oireachtas member, and indeed the public, were repeatedly told that there would be just less than €1 billion available in this budget for new measures. In the last week, this changed by 20%, and now it has become €1.2 billion. This makes a mockery of the budgetary reform process and places opposition at a distinct disadvantage to government in the lead-up to the budget. This must change into the future. Ceann Comhairle, this budget has been cast very much in the shadow of Brexit. The truth is we do not yet know what it means for Ireland. Brexit is a leap into the unknown for our country and is set to become the dominant political and economic issue facing the island of Ireland, at least for the next number of years. We have to accept a number of fundamental truths. Brexit is going to happen, perhaps in as little as 2 or 2.5 years' time. It may be a manageable negotiated process, but equally it may not. Competing interests in Europe will want to pull the process in different directions. We will be one of 27 countries on the EU side of the negotiating table, albeit the one with the most at stake. The fact that nobody wants a hard border with the 6 counties doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The fact that the imposition of customs and tariffs would damage both the economies of the EU and the UK doesn't mean it couldn't happen by accident or design. The fact that the common travel area we have at the UK predates our membership of the EU does not guarantee it will survive post-Brexit. We have to accept these realities and plan accordingly. The negotiations will formally commence when British Prime Minister Theresa May triggers Article 50 by next March, will be among the most important this country has ever participated in, and we need to be fully prepared. Much like the Apple ruling from the European Commission, the government here seemed ill-prepared for the Brexit vote. It is an open question as to whether this government has the strength and capacity to meet the challenge of Brexit. Only time will tell, but on the evidence of today, it's not looking good, I have to say. When I look at the practical measures announced, there are a few bits and bobs, Minister Noonan, in particular on the tax side, but when I look at the major challenge facing our enterprise agencies, the Enterprise Ireland, to help Irish SMEs develop new export markets, the IDA to help to attract inward investment from the UK, you have provided €3 million extra on the Jobs and Enterprise Department to help the agencies. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic. There's €1 million in the Department of the Taoiseach for new units to deal with Brexit, parliamentary liaison and programme for government commitments. €1 million. And the lead department, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, their work, in addition to the establishment of a Brexit team in the department, within existing budget and staffing envelopes. Now, I can tell you, if you compare that to what is being done throughout Europe by all of the other main countries, who have a lot less at stake in the Brexit process compared to we have, my God, they're investing a lot more and they're a lot more prepared for what is coming down the track. And that package is pathetic, and it's going to have to be addressed and changed very, very quickly. For the past number of decades, we have been in the enviable position of benefiting from US foreign direct investment while enjoying a strong trading relationship with the UK and gaining all the benefits of European Union membership and indeed access to the single market. We now need clear leadership to navigate the enormous challenges posed by Brexit, both the knowns and indeed the unknowns. This means defining exactly what we want from the negotiations between the EU and the UK. It means having a plan in the first instance, but critically a plan that is credible and deliverable. There are very current and practical initiatives we can undertake now in order to prepare ourselves for the fallout from Brexit. Prior to the referendum in June, sterling was trading at 77 pence to the euro. Simon McKeever of the Irish Exporters Association has said their research points to 85 pence as the pain point for a lot of exporting Irish companies. With sterling now trading at around 90 pence to the euro, that means a lot of pain already for Irish firms. Jobs have already been lost. This is making Irish goods and services sold to the UK more expensive and making us less competitive. Many SMEs operating to tight margins are unable to pass on this cost to their customers and must indeed try to absorb it for as long as they possibly can. Some of the stats around our dependence on trade with the UK are startling. We import 85% of our energy from the UK. Ireland and the UK exchange €1.2 billion worth of goods and services every week. 14% of Irish goods and services are exported to the UK, but for Irish-owned companies, they export 44% of their goods and services to the UK. And 30% of all employment in this country is in sectors which are heavily related and dependent on the UK market. The fall in sterling is only one example of the immediate pain small businesses are facing in a post-Brexit vote environment. Many commentators forecast a further fall in sterling, which will pile yet more pressure on SMEs and other exporting companies. We have to have a national hedging strategy. We have to draw in the support and expertise of the NTMA to assist SMEs struggling to come to terms with the fall in the pound in the short term. We welcome the plans to reduce the capital gains tax regime for entrepreneurs. The SME sector is one of the principal backbones of our economy, and measures like this will be of some help, modest help, to assist start-ups and will hopefully help to sustain jobs and create more jobs. We encourage the Government, as I said, to provide more funding to Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, the LEOs who are here on the ground assisting SMEs who are exporting to the UK on a day-to-day basis. We all know the agri-food sector in particular is extremely vulnerable to Brexit, with over 27% of exports to the UK being from food and live animals. My colleague Deputy Calleary will address address this issue and indeed other issues facing the farming community in the context of Brexit and indeed commodity prices. Tourism Ireland informs us that the UK is one of our top 4 markets for overseas tourism, delivering some 4.5 million visitors in 2015. Not only do we face being less competitive in terms of our prices, but now we could face a return to restricted travel and passport controls between Ireland and the UK. Ceann Comhairle, this will place even more pressure on our tourist industry and is likely to significantly hurt smaller tourist providers. We are glad to see the retention of the 9% VAT rate for tourism and hospitality. We believe that this is vital against the backdrop of Brexit. Finally, Brexit has serious implications for the border region and our general relations, of course, with Northern Ireland. A hard border between the Republic and the North would be a deeply regressive step, both politically, economically and socially. Many businesses in the border area rely on the free movement of goods and services and indeed of customers across the border in order to survive. A hard border could potentially be the death knell for many of these businesses, both north and south. We have a unique perspective as the only country to have a land border with the UK, and we need to emphasise this at a European level at every opportunity. And we do welcome some of the measures which you did announce, Minister, but you're going to have to be prepared to do more, including very targeted measures around the issue of employer PRSI for SMEs who are particularly dependent on export markets, because they simply will not survive if the current trend continues. There are undoubtedly opportunities from Brexit too, and those have to be highlighted, particularly in the area of inward investment from multinationals wishing to retain a foothold in the EU and from financial services firms currently in the City of London. The idea is going about its work quietly but with purpose, and we fully support them in their efforts to bring more investment to Ireland in the context of Brexit. There are particular opportunities in the financial services area. We need to ensure that our regulatory system has the capacity to accommodate and respond to more international financial service providers in Ireland. We do not want brass plate operations. We want real operations with real jobs located in Ireland. And for all of these reasons and more, we have called, and we repeat the call today, for a minister with overall responsibility for Brexit to be appointed as quickly as possible. Ceann Comhairle, today's budget provides for modest reductions in the universal social charge. Fianna Fáil supports these measures. There are those who say there should be no tax cuts whatsoever in this budget. We believe that working people all over this country also deserve to benefit from the economic recovery. After all, they are paying the taxes which make it possible to provide the public services we all want to see in our society. We should also bear one key statistic in mind. Prior to Ireland's economic crisis in 2008, less than 30% of all tax collected in this country came from income tax. Last year, workers paid over 40% of all tax by way of income tax. The reductions announced today won't make an enormous difference to anyone, but people will take some comfort from seeing the USC going in the right direction. Equally, it is important to be straight with people. Fianna Fáil does not believe it is either possible or desirable to abolish the USC during this Dáil term. It will not happen. To do so would be to put vital public services at risk. However, should the economy continue to recover, there will be scope to continue to reduce the burden of the USC over the years ahead. We also repeat our view that there is a need for a plan to reform and simplify our income tax system, and over time we are going to have to deal with the issue of the entry point to the higher rate of tax at €33,800. We effectively have 3 different tax charges in Ireland on income, each with a different entry point and a total of 10 rates, 15 bands and 22 personal tax credits. Ceann Comhairle, Fianna Fáil did press for a reduction in dirt tax in this budget. Savers have been hit incredibly hard in recent times. The Minister has announced a 2% cut for next year and further cuts in recent years. I would like to have seen a greater cut, but this is at least a start. The rate of dirt has increased from 20% to 41% since 2008, with an additional 4% PRSI for people who have a certain level of unearned income. This has come at a time when interest rates and returns generally are rock bottom. There are people who do depend on interest income, and they have suffered a double whammy in recent times with the hikes in dirt and the collapse in returns. Today's announcement is a modest step in the right direction. Ceann Comhairle, it's every person's wish to provide financial security for family members and people close to them. People will naturally want to be able to pass on the benefits of their lifetime's work to their children, grandchildren and other family members, depending on their particular circumstances. And many will argue that that's not a priority at this time. But we believe that in relation to inheritance tax, we felt the programme for government commitment to only increase the Group A threshold was very unfair, and I made this point to the Minister in recent weeks. The yield from CAT has increased by over 65% since 2011. In 2015, the largest category of inheritance tax cases, at 33%, was actually in respect of nieces and nephews, followed by gifts and inheritance involving what is known as strangers of blood at 23%. 21% of the cases where a liability arose were in respect of a sibling, with only 18% involving Category A recipients in terms of children. So the programme for government commitment to increase Group A to 500,000 but leave Group B unchanged has now been departed from, and we welcome the fact that there is an increase, albeit a modest one, of 8% also in respect of Group B and C. Ceann Comhairle, we also welcome the fact that the home carer tax credit is being increased again in this year's budget. Many families are dependent on a single income, and this will be a very small help, and it will be viewed by many in the context of the childcare initiative, which is welcome and which has been announced as part of today's budget. Many single income families where one partner or spouse makes the decision to stay at home and mind the children, they will feel very put out at childcare supports that are going to those who have to or who make the choice to go to work, and that is an issue which is going to have to be taken into account. So the increase in the credit is welcome. It's very modest. We'd like to have seen more in that area. Ceann Comhairle, I welcome the Minister's comments in relation to Ireland's 12.5% corporation tax rate. Fianna Fáil is unequivocally committed to defending this rate. We are very sceptical of the European Commission's plans for a common consolidated corporate tax base. In terms of corporation tax receipts, we are undoubtedly building up a dependence on a small number of companies, and this will need to be very carefully monitored. We need to continue to play our part in the international efforts to tackle the way in which multinational profits can be shifted from one jurisdiction to another, while at the same time defending our vital national interest. Ceann Comhairle, Fianna Fáil believes firmly that home ownership is good for families and good for communities. Having a place to call your own, build a vibrant family life around and pass on to future generations is a pillar of a normal, civilised and prosperous society. Yet that basic dream is slipping away from an entire generation. For them, the tax reductions we see today will simply disappear into the widening chasm of rent that is swallowing up more and more of their income. The question is whether or not the government has got it right in terms of the intervention that they're making with the first-time buyer tax rebate. We do not believe that the government has got this right, and we believe that this initiative and intervention actually risks making the situation worse, and we should learn from the lessons of the past. We want to know whether or not there has been a full impact assessment, for example, in respect of this proposal. We want to know what expert advice is available to the government in support of this measure and what independent assessment of the likely impact on the market has been done. The overriding concern we have is that this intervention will simply push up the price of new homes. We have been repeatedly told that the problem is on the supply side, and Minister, you make the point in your speech that this is effectively to stimulate supply. But it does raise a number of issues of fundamental fairness. If you are a returning emigrant and you haven't paid taxes in Ireland in recent years, are you not entitled now to benefit from this scheme? If you want to remain in your local community in an area where there happens to be no new housing supply whatsoever, are you denied the right to benefit from this scheme because you are forced to buy a second-hand home? And what if you're on modest income and you haven't paid that much income tax in the last number of years? Are you denied the right to benefit fully from this scheme? And also, if you owned a property in the past, if you were previously married, a relationship broke down, you're no longer a first-time buyer, and that also raises the issue. If this is about stimulating new supply, then why would you exclude that cohort of people from it? And we proposed a much more gradual, moderate response, which would have taken time to build up by way of a Help to Buy scheme in our manifesto. And Deputy Barry Cowan is working on supply-side initiatives and will unveil those in the coming weeks, because we have been repeatedly told that that is where the immediate problem lies, is in respect of supply. And we don't see how this is going to provide the boost to supply that is promised. The key issue seems to be that it is unviable to build in many parts of the country. And an initiative around, for example, a more aggressive plan to reduce development charges all over the country could potentially have made construction and building new homes more viable in that respect. Our central bank submission on the review of the mortgage rules highlighted the need for tenants to be given some credit in the deposit calculation for the rent that they are paying, and also we have argued that the deposit requirement for non-first-time buyers should be the same as the requirement for first-time buyers. Ceann Comhairle, we welcome the modest rollout of further social protection benefits to the self-employed by way of dental, optical and the invalidity pension payments, and we hope that that process can be continued over the period ahead. And we also welcome the further step towards providing equality of treatment in terms of income tax and the equivalent of a POE tax credit for the self-employed, and I hope that that can be completed in the next year or so. When the dust settles on this budget, other issues which are key to household budgets will have to be dealt with. Minister, we will be very much pushing in the coming weeks at the Oireachtas Finance Committee the Fianna Fáil bill to tackle the issue of excessive standard variable interest rates. That issue hasn't gone away. It has not been properly tackled. You told me you intend to meet the banks again shortly. I hope you will press them very forcibly on this issue. It's gone to the ECB for consultation, and the Oireachtas Finance Committee in the next week or two will start holding deliberations on that bill, and we very much look forward to that, because it's not just an issue for mortgage holders, it's an issue for small businesses, farmers, community and sporting groups all over this country who are paying way over the odds in terms of the rates paid elsewhere in Europe. And we also welcome the fact that you have again committed that at the end of next year mortgage interest relief will be renewed for those who are currently receiving it. That will be of significant benefit to those. The whole issue of motor insurance, which is eating into household budgets, and the entire gain in terms of the USC reduction in this budget could be wiped out overnight with the policy premium renewal that people are getting in the post, and that's going to have to be dealt with. We're glad the government has set up a task force that needs to report urgently, and it needs to contain effective measures for implementation this side of Christmas, which can deal with the issue of unsustainable and spiralling spikes in insurance premiums. And we look forward to that being tackled. And indeed, Deputy Cleary will speak about the issue of flooding, and again our lack of preparedness, our lack of investment in terms of flood defences. And there's great concern in the areas that were affected by flooding last winter that the underlying causes have not been dealt with, and people are very fearful of what's coming in the next couple of months, Minister, I can assure you. Across a range of issues that are crying out for long-term action, the government has shown itself to be bereft of ideas. From pensions to infrastructure, energy security to research and development, the government has floundered from the word go. Nearly 60% of private sector workers, for example, do not have an occupational pension. That's almost 1 million workers who will have to rely on the old age pension alone. This is a particular problem, as it will become increasingly common for people to be paying rent in the older years rather than owning their home outright, as was the norm. Among OECD countries, only Ireland and New Zealand do not have compulsory pension saving, and this is one of the long-term strategic challenges facing this country, which simply must be tackled, as is the issue of the state pension, and we were pleased to fight hard and to secure a €5 increase on that payment. But if further increases are to be guaranteed in the long term, we need a clear approach for planning for state pensions, including public sector employee pensions. There are approximately 360,000 recipients of the contributory state pension. This is increasing at an average rate of 5%. And if you look at the demographic changes, it will result in very significant changes in the balance between the number of people at work and pensioners. We have to plan, not just in the short term, but in the medium and the long term, for the challenges that creates. I will leave the issue of capital investment and infrastructure to my colleague Deputy Cleary. But again, here there has been a distinct lack of direction, lack of imagination and lack of vision in this area, as there has been in the area of energy security, a further issue, particularly in the context of Brexit, where 85 to 90% of our energy is imported from the UK. A hard exit could see energy import tariffs imposed in the UK, and if these are in turn passed on to the Irish market, then this will create very fundamental difficulties for us. Similarly, in respect of multi-annual funding for science, research and technology, these are areas that are vital to our long-term economic interests. Ceann Comhairle, this is not the government we wanted following the general election last February. On 3 occasions, we offered our party leader, Deputy Micheál Martin, as a nominee for Taoiseach, as the only candidate who could lead an alternative to the Fine Gael-led government. We all know the outcome of that process. It behoves all of us now to work as best we can in the national interest, and that is what we have sought to do as a party since election day. Ceann Comhairle, we look forward to debating the budget measures in much more detail over the weeks ahead in the form of the Finance Bill and the Social Welfare Bill. There is a great onus on all of us to examine in detail the measures contained in those bills, and we look forward to fulfilling our parliamentary duties in that regard. All Fianna Fáil deputies and senators will more than play their part to ensure that Budget 2017 receives proper scrutiny over the period ahead. Thank you very much.